Welcome back, travelers, to what are you doing, Joe? For legendary lore, what are you doing, Joe?
The chicken dance. That was pretty obvious by the moves that were exclusive to the chicken dance.
Okay, sure. Today we're talking about the final and best story of Strixhaven, story of Killian Liu. Now, beyond my somewhat biased opinion about Silver Quill, I do think this is one of the best stories they wrote.
It's only because of his biased opinion. It's because Ricky's evil.
It's Silver Quill and not evil, Joe. It does not have any mention of Extus in the story. So it's safe to say that this takes place after the events of the main storyline. On the Rose stage, there's about 6 students doubled over in pain, trying not to cry as they are in the fetal position on the ground. And then on the actual stage, in the center stage, you have Killian Liu and Professor Razaneth. This is a duel concerning the 7 phonetic attitudes: tone, rhythm, pitch, placement, resonance, acoustics, volume, dip, duck, dive, and dodge.
I wasn't counting, but that felt like more than 7.
It might have been. Razaneth was going to have the 7 best classmates for each of those different things enter the duel. So, like I had said, there were 6 of the students. So tone, rhythm, pitch, placement, resonance, acoustics, all that had already been done. Then you have volume, which is the 7th value, which was assigned to Killian. That is the hardest one to actually get right. It's literally just yelling. And so Killian's here and he has to do he's in a screaming match is what it starts off as, right? And obviously
It'd be what Vegeta would be best at.
He goes, "He's not your average Silver Quill student. He's a super Silver Quill." Razaneth is so confident, because obviously he's Silver Quill, that he doesn't even have to do anything. All he's going to do, instead of saying words, is make a sound. He was going to hinder himself by using only voiceless consonants. That's how he's going to be fighting him. And Killian's there and he's thinking, I'm going to fight this guy and he's going to fight me basically to the death. And I don't have my partner. We have a name for his inkling, Doko. So he does not have Doko on his side. And Killian is a little worried about that, but his dad told him he couldn't use Doko because it was a reliance on something that's weaker than himself, and it causes him to become weaker as a result. And so Killian immediately starts conjuring up these spheres of ink. He goes, "I'd happily oblige you, Professor, but the stench of your breath has handily poisoned the air." And then while he says that, a line of ink thinner than the width of a spider's web had been going across the ground like a vine and grew up, and then it just jabbed right at the professor's neck and wrapped around him. Wrapped around an arm and around his leg. And then Razaneth just goes and cuts all the shackles with his own ink blades. And then he goes, and then giant black spheres are coming at the professor from Killian, right? He's throwing these things. "Hardly the time to applaud your efforts when our duel has just begun." And at the phrase, the spheres explode, and there's just a bunch of little ink-made trolls with hammers and axes, and they start attacking him. And he goes, "Shh!" And a giant tidal wave of ink rushes out of his arm. Because remember how he has an ink arm? And it just destroys the trolls. And he goes, "Shh! The soothing sound of so much rushing water would ring better when you threw drowning in it." And at his curse, the boulder that he was coming towards him morphs into a black column the size of a tower and solid as stone, and it smashes into his shield like a smith's hammer, and it just keeps smashing into him. And there's just Razaneth responds by going tick, 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 tick. And as soon as he does that, a bunch of arrows like he's shooting tick, 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 just start hitting the column and destroy it. And I know I don't usually talk about the action, but the fact that it is dialogue based just amps me up, because it's actually it's showing the characters' actions in the way they speak, because that is the magic of Silver Quill, Joe. Killian then immediately yells, "Decrepit parasite!" And he's able to get away. "Crooked serpent!" And he starts to run away, crumbling column, transforming into ravens, and they started intercepting each of the arrows. And then he yells through gnashing teeth, "All the volume and vitriol, waste of muscle, waste of sinew, shard-born, unlovable beast, decayed and withered peon, mulling varlet to say the least." The entire sky above them is just black as the boulder flattens into a disc that is stretching out across the entirety of the rose. It's insane. It turns into a cyclone and it catches the professor and it's torn, and Killian, his throat is on fire and he can taste blood, and I know exactly what he's talking about. Caustic, carrion, rancorous wretch, grossling, blaking gasbag, blight afflicted, woe infected, smoldered, emaciated slag. And as he yells all this thing, the venom from his, there's spit all over my mic. He thinks he won, and there's this searing pain. A soft T went straight into his chest. A singular sent an arrow into Killian's chest moments before he would have won. And he looked at his classmates thinking he had succeeded, and he sees this one girl. Her name is Vanessa Fjorn. He just kind of falls to his knees because he can't pull the ink out of his chest. And there's just a herd of wild ink horses that trample him. And the whole time he's just looking at her, and she gives him a smile of solidarity. And then at that moment, the ink takes hold. And the way the ink works is that you can stab somebody in the heart with the spear, and it'll work its way into the body, into the soul, and just fill them with sadness and despair. And he just starts crying, and he's defeated. And basically it takes the entire day for the actual ink tentacle curse to be peeled from his spine and rib cage. And it's just like, oh my gosh. So he comes to, and he's face to face with a Quillmancer. I would like to take this moment to note that it says Quillmancer and not Willmancer, which was something that we had talked about during the Silver Quill episode. I think it's a typo, and that they meant to say Quillmancer. And this is the right way to spell it, and then the other thing was wrong. Dean Shiel comes in. She's the white side of Silver Quill. Mm-hmm. And she's talking about battle poetry. She's basically just trying to like encourage him. You can venture into unimaginable depths of potential, both the light and the dark. I caution you, you have to learn to embrace light every now and then, because that's better for your soul. And Killian just straight up says, white magic is not effective in battle. And she's like, on the contrary, battle is when it is most effective. It can win the war. And Killian kind of just like looks into her eyes, looking for more answers. And like, there's obviously this concept of light and shadow, and he needs more information. He needs that guidance. And she says, like a hole in a tapestry, light can pierce even the most stubborn bit of darkness. But try as it might, though it can dim it at times, darkness can never pierce the light. And she says, no rest for the wary, I suppose. He gets up, grabs his robes, and marches for the door. And Shell stops him. And she says, the cosmos is vast, and eloquence are not the only ones who shape it. Don't spend all your magic in one place. Killian has to get to the Biblioplex. On his palm, there's a thing called parental ink, Petroscript, etched onto his hand. It itches, and it will not stop itching until the word written on it is said out loud, which basically you could get rid of it at any time, but it's time-based. So when it goes off, it's like, oh, it's a reminder, I need to go do this thing. So he looks at it and he says semantics, and the Petroscript fades. But he's too late. He's at dock 17. The semantics-bound boat is already on its way. It's gone. It's leaving. Like sturdy, somber stepping stones, the waters neath my feet do hold. He says this, and he walks on water.
Interesting.
And this white energy just kind of like comes off of his feet because of the poem. The poem allows his feet to be able to go on water like it was anything. And he gets onto the boat deck. And who would he see there but Vanessa, smiling at him. And she says, light magic is good for something, I guess. And so they start talking about Razaneth and about the arrow to the heart, the successful duel, and how he learned a new weakness and how he's not going to let it happen again. And she goes, mercy is for fools. And that's something that his dad had said many times. And so he felt like it never really something he felt comfortable about. Mercy is for fools. Like, what is this? Cobra Kai? Come on. And she was saying that such raw, dark power, if he had used it on anybody else, he could have killed anyone else if he had tried to. And he goes, I wasn't trying to kill the guy. I don't want to kill. I was just trying to win. The thing is, like we had said before, he was tasting blood in his mouth. He was screaming. He was going wrong because he was doing volume. No one does volume. It's a terrible idea. I'm aware of the irony. And she's like, well, I know a way to get an elixir from there that would just fix a sore throat like nobody's business. All of that happens, and then she says, Strixhaven is after all an institute of learning, nothing more. No rest for the wary, I suppose. And Vanessa goes on to another boat that's passing by and heads for Bow's End. So she was basically just taking it as a shortcut. And she says, you should step out in the sun once in a while, Killian Lou. We're not meant to grow in the shadows. So Killian sits there, and the boat disappears, and he thinks about what she said. He goes into the biblioplex to the Hall of Semantics. And it's great because he's in the hall, he's on his way to the Hall of Semantics, and he looks into the darkness of an archway, and he sees his friend. Hello, Quint. He goes,
is Quintorius everybody's friend?
Of course he's everybody's friend. He's
Quintorius.
Yes, he's undefeatable. Quint's like, everyone's talking about the duel. You did volume, and by the sound of it, you're a natural. And Killian's like, you do love your research. And so Quint gives him a thin tome. He goes, Deborius Eaglet, the mute quillancer. And Killian's like, what, a mute? And basically, Quint explains he cast all his spells using an ancient form of sign language when Volume took his voice. So he was incredible. He charmed an entire army to lay down their arms and shake hands in truce. He understood the death and destructions are notes any instrument can play. The Symphony of Creation is far more dramatic. And so
I like how Quintorius knows all these. He probably knows legends of like every college too.
Yeah, because he knows history. He knows about all these different things. But what's important here is that he gave Killian a book about a mute because the mute had lost his voice, which is what Killian is kind of afraid of right now, is losing his voice because of all the volume training. He's kind of getting that reminder. This book is a reminder that he could lose his voice permanently. So now Killian is in the Hall of Semantics. He's sitting there. In the shadow of this giant stack of books is Ambrose. You left yourself vulnerable, didn't you? He said, I thought I cut all the arrows. You thought wrong, didn't you? Well, perhaps if Doko was allowed to fight at my side. He always helps me in times of trouble. This is not a game of Mage Tower, Killian. Reliance on your inkling makes you dependent, weak, and unfocused. Eloquence, the supreme arbiters of the cosmos and forces of all magical contracts, are resolute and unwavering in their word. Your breath was shallow today. Your shoulders were raised to your ears. You were constantly sticking your neck out like some Vaseline demagoth. You're going to get yourself hurt or worse conjuring in such a way. Apologies, Father. I was not expecting a duel so soon, as with a teacher, no less. You should always expect the unexpected. Light music would be unexpected. Light magic would be unexpected. Perhaps creating something would be better than destroying it. Pretty words of quillmancers and lumimancers will not save you from sudden death. Oriq hearts do not bend in battle. Mage hunters' souls are never mended. They must be broken. Reams of ink exploded out of him like black lava and white fire from a volcano. It's so epic. You're in line to be one of the greatest ink masters in history because you're such many enemies will try to steal away that greatness. You must never give them an opportunity. Your words must be like serrated daggers, cutting enough to peel flesh from bone. Eviscerate the prey you have come to hunt and feast upon it. That is the only way to defeat your enemies. Do you understand? So then, Killian's kind of just spending the entire day reciting, memorizing battle poems, trying everything he can, but it just continuously weakens him over and over again because it's like he's been talking since 10 o'clock and it's 2:16. And
we're still talking about Killian?
Yeah. Just continuously yelling. It's not good. And he basically can only get water. So he's drinking water over and over again. And all it does is make him want to pee. And so he's basically
still talking about Killian.
So he just puts his hand on the table and he's looking at the floor. And then he sees the book Quintorius had given him moving on its own. And then he sees ink come out of it and he realizes that Doko, Killian's inkling, that Quint had smuggled Doko through in the book to Killian.
That's amazing.
And so Killian sees Doko and Doko's like doing like a little dance thing. When he looks at the book, he remembers, what if I lose my voice? And then he thought of Vanessa. And he's like, you know what? I got to go do it. So Killian is standing at the last Dawn Bow Stone, which is like a little bit away from the Bow's End Tavern, which is where Vanessa said to meet him, right? So he's there and he's standing. He sees 3 Witherbloom students entering the Bow's End Tavern. He sees the giant doors. He sees that inside there's just sweeping Prismari music. And he sees one of the students look back and notice him. Let me describe it the way it's described for him. green skin, shining gold eyes, and hair of damp leaves. They gave her away immediately. It was Dina, also a second year. And so then she calls out, "Are you waiting for someone, Killy?" And Killian's like, "Killy." And she's like, "They might be inside." And he looks around, he doesn't see Vanessa, so he's like, "Okay." She goes, "I'd love to catch up, but I can't dither. I have a date, our third. Something new I'm trying, making friends. Vicus is his name. He's a fourth year and he's almost nice." Almost. Bit of a brute. And so they go in and he's never been into the Bow's End. So he just sees this Prismari band. He sees all this stuff happening. There's students with all kinds of goblets and seasoned meats, which I mean, come on, seasoned meats. And eventually he spots Vanessa. And so he goes over to where she is. Dina goes with the guy that she to see the guy that she was with. And Vanessa's like, "Oh, look who decided to make an appearance. Killian Lou, the rule breaker, and with a girlfriend, no less." Now, obviously, this is his response. "Oh no, Dina is not. She is not. Dina is not. No, she's a friend. We're friends. Me and her, just friends. She's a girl, I'm a boy, but we're friends, not."
Dina's just like, "Yeah, I have friends now. Hi, I'm Dina." She becomes
Hi.
Daisy.
Yeah, I was going to say, "Hi, I'm Daisy." And so Vanessa says, "Did you hear Razaneth is planning to have duels with us once a week?" And he's like, "What?" And his voice is already starting to go at this point. She goes, "So you'll have to prove yourself again and again." Yep, that's what it takes. So Killian says, "I'm going to take up the drink. I'm going to take the drink." And she goes, "Say no more, Killy. Say no more." And Killian's like kind of weirded out because Dina had just called him Killy. How did she hear him? Like, how did she hear that? And so while she goes off to get the drink, he pulls out Quint's book. Doko appears. He gives him a smile and a wink. And he's like in a slightly better mood because of this. And the Inkling takes out its little paws. It turns the page to a book of pictures with a bunch of hands and fingers in different shapes and positions. And there's words of affirmation written underneath, like kind-hearted, virtuous, love, stuff like that. Then he looks at the sign for light. Create something, he thought to himself as he focuses his attention. And in a moment, he uses his hands to sign light, and he creates a faint glow. And he can feel the heat of the candles on the table intensify. And so he does all that, and it's like super cool. It's great. And while he's working on doing this fancy light magic and like kind of embracing this guy shows up and he's like, "I haven't seen you in here before." He smelled the guy first and he sees that this is brute and he's got like a floral scent on him. Like he tried to put something on himself to cover his swamp stench. "Dina tells me you two are close. She tells me you spend time together." Spent in the bog. I just helped her with a project. Ongoing. And then, of course, Dina comes in to try and save the day. Vicus. I mean, the guy is huge. He's wide shoulders. He'd be a football player, basically. Uh-huh. And he's like, Killian's like, "No, she's just a friend. Just a friend." And then Vicus smiles, and he's a vampire. And he's like, "Cool. Not only are you a swamp monster, you're a swamp vampire." Like, he starts to like glow. And Vanessa's like, 2 in 1 day. Someone's popular. And Killian really doesn't want to fight Vicus, especially with the way his throat is. And so Vanessa passes him the drink. It's like a purple glowing liquid, and it's bubbling up and stuff, right? So Killian does only thing he can think of, and he just downs it. And when he drinks it, he gets like this rush, like it was liquid courage. "Oh, brutish bug boy, now you say you're green with envy, when all this time I thought you were green from inhaling your own stench every day." And then black currents of magic pour out of his back, transferring along skeletal legs and the thorax of a spider. And so like now, Killian has like a battle mech, basically. That he's the bottom of a spider. And everybody, he's got a crowd. Everybody's like gathering around. And as it's happening, the entire building is transforming to where it's a stage for the two of them to fight with each other while everyone else is able to stay out of the area. Because this is the kind of world that we live in, where duels like this can just happen. Like the withering flower, you'll wither, bloom. Just going back and forth, back and forth. I'm going to skip a little bit. Jealous infinitesimal wart, putrid sack of melancholy. Your precious Dina pities you. She is one creature you will never have, no matter how hard you try to cover your stink. He shoots a black arrow, and it just tears into Vicus's chest. And as he continues to speak, the arrow just kind of starts to grow, and it starts to consume him, and it rolls into Vicus's eyes, which were gold, and start to turn black. And Dina shouts, and she's terrified. Like he's just dying there. Killian is killing him. And he continues to speak, and the ink continues to spread. But he looks at her when she yells his name, and he sees that she's terrified. And he looks at Vanessa, and she is just loving this. And she says, "Make your father proud, Killian Lou." And he looks back at Vicus, his eyes wide with terror, his soul breaking apart. And he's like, "I don't want to do this." And so all he has to do is speak, and he can call the curses back. So he opens his mouth, and he can't say anything. Every time he tries to speak mercy, it gets caught in his throat like he's choking. And then he feels it inside of him, something trying to coax him to speak more curses. And he looks at Vanessa.
Is that what the drink did?
The drink not only coated his throat, it basically made it to where only curses could come out.
It enchanted his throat.
Yes. And so he's thinking like, I don't know what to do.
It's a sign book.
And so he reaches into his robes and he takes out the Book of the Mute, which is what he calls it. And Doku comes out immediately with the right page. And the inkling starts doing the hand motions, and he starts doing the same hand motion continuously. I wish I knew what the hand motion was, because all it is you are enough. And so when he looks at him, he saw that the guy was fueled by jealousy and a fear of being overlooked, and he had just ignited that. He had driven himself and created a wedge in that, using Dina as a weapon. So he kept focusing and doing that same motion. You are enough. You are enough. And as he did that, more and more light began to ripple off of Killian, and it began to bathe him, Vicus, in this glow. And it continued to just kind of like in waves. And Vicus's eyes began to glow golden, and his body began to show this healing light rippling across it. And he had this smile pulling at his lips, and there were tears in his eyes. Vicus was like left on the ground, and he got up, and like he looked like a new person. His countenance had completely changed. And everyone just like goes wild. The crowd goes wild about everything that just happened. And Killian's like, "This is insane." Runs to the restroom immediately, gets to the sink, and just starts trying to scoop the water down his throat. And his throat is on fire. And every time he tries to wash it away, it just gets worse and worse. And then, of course, Vanessa comes in. So what happens?
Vanessa going to the boys' bathroom.
Why you gotta think that in this fictional world that they have to separate their bathrooms by gender, Joe?
Because that's what's proper to do.
It's what's proper. This is a pub, Joe. Get it together. She goes, "You could have ended him." Not right. "Eviscerate the prey you had come to hunt and feast upon it. Isn't that what your father told you to do?" And then he starts to realize, "Have you been following me? Have you been stalking me?" She goes, "Yes, I have been following you. We've been watching you for a very long time." And now he's really freaking out. What was in the drink? Nothing in particular. A bit of ale, herbs, Oriq magic to suppress all that guilt you carry. Then she starts to sparkle purple and then bursts into flames. And now she has the Oriq mask on her. "An ink master with a conscience does not an eloquent make." She takes out another helmet and she hands it to Killian. "Our new leader sees great promise in you, but the road to your true destiny is full of terrors no one at Strixhaven could ever prepare you for. Look at yourself now. Your voice sacrificed for them, for Razaneth, for your father's expectations. All that big talk and bravado for what? The power you called upon while dueling that pathetic Witherbloom without the countless hours of training, without fear, without empathy, is what you'll need to become who you are meant to be. Free. So, Killian looks at the mask in his hands. It turns out that potion also made him slightly more susceptible to suggestion. And he's thinking he just wants it all to end. All the regret, all the disappointments, all the expectations. He could just disappear, join the Oriq, become greater than he was. And as he's looking at the mask, mere inches from his face, Doko pops up from the mute's book. And it looks desperately at him. Killian was still like caught in that trance. And so what Doko does is it melts into a wisp of ink and writes out a message in the air. We don't destroy, we create. And with that, this weight falls from his shoulders. That was the freedom he wanted. The mask evaporates in his hands. And she's like, you're not worthy of the Oriq. You're a lowly, insufferable fool and you'll die like one. And from outside, he can hear that there are mage hunters. Somehow, there are still mage hunters attacking the school. You'd think they'd be better at this. And they're in the pub.
I just imagine Lilian trying to warn everybody, just like, okay, guys, the mage hunters are still out there. Just like, nah. Are you serious?
So then Doko morphs into 3 hand symbols. Killian starts to mimic them. Light. Bring light. The room begins to ripple with the white magic. A ball of gold light surrounds him, repels all the spears of Vanessa, suddenly launches in direction, and everything the light touches seems to shine like the sun, and he rises into the air in beaming defiance. She's hurling curses at him, but none of them get through, and he just keeps creating the ball light that grows and grows, and then it consumes her. He tapped his tongue to the back of his teeth and released a soft t and shot an arrow into her heart. A golden, shimmering arrow. I speak mercy into you. She screams as her eyes fill with gold. The room explodes. Suddenly, Vanessa runs away on the chittering legs of the mage hunter. And Killian and Doko, they chase after her. They can't, because obviously he tried to reach her. So Killian is stopped. He's not able to catch up with Vanessa. The reason is because there's a ton of mage hunters all around him. And he knows that he could try to use his dark magic kind of thing to kill all of them, right? Obviously. But Doko jumps up and starts rotating in 20 little black blobs, each a different hand symbol. And he just starts spinning real fast. And so he just starts saying, I speak peace into you now, so light may drive the darkness out. I speak peace into you now, so light may drive the darkness out. And an intense glow just hits the mage hunters. And the purple glow that's inside of them dims and is replaced with this whiteness. And they're blinded basically by this light. And they start just like, they're completely confused. And Vickers just starts smashing all the creatures. Attack with everything you got. And so all the mages, they form circles around the beast and they just start killing them. 50 students blessing
Biggest
a barrage.
end up becoming just like Killian's biggest fan.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And then, of course, the last creature is killed by Dina, who throws this giant ball of burl magic at the creatures and just shatters them. A little while later, Killian's just up against a wall. He's completely drained. And Dina shows up and she goes, you look like you need a drink. And she comes over to him and she gives him a little drink, a little wooden bowl. I mean, the odor is terrible, but he drinks it and he feels a ton better. It's funny because he says, Dina tells him, one of the students I tutor put it in his head that my teas were deadly. I disagree. My blends are ripe with herbs designed for healing ailments like your voice. This batch is one of my favorites and has only a few side effects. In we go. And then Vickers is like, don't do that. That's terrible. See a nurse. He tells him the rumors are true. You Silver Quill are vicious. Before the mage hunters, the girl you were with made it known to all of us. The Strixhaven would burn and that all of us would perish at the hands of the Oriq. And he thinks, if I hadn't used light magic, if I had used my darkness, I probably could have killed her and stopped her from getting away. And Killian kind of like is upset. And Vickers goes, did she get away? And he's like, yeah, good. And Killian's like, excuse you. And he goes, well, you changed her. Dina reminds him, if what she felt was anywhere near what he did to Vicus, she will never be the same. And that change could spread beyond her to the other Oriq and shift their hearts and turn them from their ways. They say, you've created a way to bring them to the light. Not even the Dean of Shadow could deny that. And then, of course, Doko comes out and he's on his shoulder and everybody's all happy and stuff. And he realizes that he did what his black magic could never do. He created change. It was through the building up of others that he was able to do that. And everybody's happy and everything's great. And he's Shael and Razanith and they're both celebrating. And then he sees Ambrose, his dad. And he holds his head high and he looks at his dad's eyes. And he's looking him dead in the eye, not because he's like being defiant. He's just like hoping. He's like kind of thinking towards him, expressing that he knows that these two ideals, these two conflicting thoughts of light and darkness, they have a place where they can meet in the middle. The cosmos is vast. Eloquence are not the only ones who shape it. And when he thought that, he kind of like sent it. And in a flash of light flickered in Ambrose's eyes. And he could tell that he got it. He got the message, that his dad received the message. Mm-hmm. And then his father's head he also raises. And he senses a warm energy flow into him. And then there's a sharp sting in the palm of his hand. And it's a Patrascript from his dad. And he looks at it and he reads it aloud. I can create.